exits for position. Goes around the outside, it's in his team.
Qualified.
Okie dokie. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Barely Qualified, a Formula One podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Channing Apodaca.
I'm Brandon Wood.
As always, we're back in the studio today. We got a twofer. We just wrapped up the Mexico Grand Prix.
Fresh off, has barely been, 10 minutes, 15 minutes since
Yeah,
the
they're
race
still
ended.
doing the post-race interviews. Last we saw, Kevin Magnussen was at the podium, which pretty weird thing happened. I think it was, we're chalking it up to, it's just like a slip of the tongue, I guess, right? But one of the commentators, I don't know who it was. I think it was Will Buxton or Martin Brundle, said that this was Kevin Magnussen's last race in Formula One.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I mean, I hope not,
Unless-
especially after getting, seventh here.
Yeah, I mean, they did have Ollie Behrman, or was it Ollie Behrman or Robert Schwartzman was in the car this weekend?
For FP1.
It was Ollie.
Behrman,
yeah, he had that big shunt with Alex Albon. But unless he accidentally leaked some information that they were going to cut ties with Kev early and get Ollie in the car, I don't know. Probably just a slip of the tongue.
Probably.
He fucked up. But yeah, we have two races to go over. We got the U.S. Grand Prix from last weekend, Mexico Grand Prix that we just wrapped up. Quite differing races, if you ask me.
Yeah, a little bit. But I will say the common theme is that we've seen Ferrari.
Oh yeah,
kind of just come full momentum from this. I don't know what you call it. End of summer break we had, leading into COTA.
it was 3 weeks off that they had.
3 weeks off after Singapore, right?
Mhm.
So, where we saw in Singapore, Ferrari maybe missed the mark a little bit. They lost maybe an opportunity to, make up some points in the Constructors' Championship. Considering, that being one of the circuits where their car would have been suitable to make up an advantage, especially with the Red Bulls.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, going back to COTA, sprint weekend ended up being probably the best sprint race we've seen this year.
Oh yeah,
by far. Like tons of action. Lando actually had a great start.
Yeah,
to the sprint. We saw him he started from fourth, I think, and then jumped
up to second right away.
Second right away in the opening laps, and then we saw a nice little battle that happened between the Ferraris. We saw the beginnings of Carlos Sainz's momentum, I think, that carried him through to here this weekend in Mexico. Good little battle that they had out on track. Let's just see who ended up taking the sprint.
Max took the sprint.
Max took the sprint. That's right. And then
it was Max from Lando, and that was the 1 point difference. And then that kind of only worsened for Lando. The lead just stretched because Lando ends up taking pole in COTA, gets a good launch, but doesn't maintain the lead on the first lap.
Him and Max have a little tussle going in the first turn. Looks like Max kind of pushes him wide a little bit. Charles is right there to take full advantage. He started from fourth on the grid, ends up taking the lead.
He did the opposite of what Lando did the day before.
Totally.
I really didn't see Charles as being a contender for this race. I thought if any of the Ferraris was going to do it, it was going to be Carlos because he looked better.
Yeah.
He had the momentum. He looked better on the weekend. And Charles is just like, he's sneaky good on weekends where he's good. He kind of doesn't show up too much in all the sessions, and then bam. But yeah, so you have Max and Lando going at it in the first turn, and Lando just once again, he gets a good launch, but he gives Max way too much space on the inside line. You cannot do that because he does defend a little bit, if you can remember. And it was like, okay, all right, you defended a little bit, you kind of backed him off, but he still just gives Max a complete straight runway on that giant, tarmac that up to turn one can go 5 cars wide. He gave way
huge,
too much room, and Max just bulldogged him and pushed him off the track, and that was
that. And then I don't remember exactly what lap it was that happened, but we saw the Max and Lando clash again, and we saw
that was later on. That was like during the hunt. Charles had already basically run away with the race. Carlos, they think they put them both on just like cruise control because they knew that Max and Lando were going to be going at it. I would say that was probably because COTA's a 51 or a 57?
It's like 50...
56?
Yeah, something in there.
So that was probably like lap 50, 51 through 53 or some shit that that incident happened where Lando ran wide, and then they ended up appealing it a few days later, which I don't think anything's come of that since then, right?
No. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, so the move, the big controversial move between Max and Lando, or I'm trying to remember exactly what lap it was.
Good luck. It was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was
a week ago. But still, what move though? The one involving who had the apex?
Yeah. So it's kind of a situation where we've seen Max do his very famous dive bombs.
Mm-hmm.
Big controversy about this online. A lot of people arguing about who had the apex and then comparing that incident to the one that George Russell had with Valtteri Bottas, where Russell ends up getting the penalty for pushing Bottas off. And so a lot of people not quite happy with how this shook out.
Because the big controversy is Lando takes a 5-second penalty for not giving the place back, right?
Lando takes the place at the end, and then off the track. He believes he had the right of way. So here's kind of what I wanted to get into is the team was kind of just fully in belief that Lando had the right to take that place.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't end up giving it back.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't remember exactly how many laps they had at the end there for Lando to be able to make the move again. But I did feel like had they have just advised Lando to give the place back, he probably could have had another chance to make the move. And I feel like they kind of wasted an opportunity there a little bit.
I think what they went with, they went overconfidently into that decision and then tried to gain a 5-second advantage because he had fresher tires. He was quicker. So that I think that they were just going to try and create a 5-second gap and then just fingers crossed that he either doesn't lose that or that the gap is big enough to lose the appeal, I guess you would call it, and that the gap is big enough that it wouldn't matter. But it doesn't end up being, and he does lose the position, and it was called before the race was even over that Lando was going to get a 5-second penalty. Yeah, so they lost it instantly.
And at that point, it was too late.
It's another instance of McLaren shooting themselves in the fucking foot, which they've done over and over again, and not fully backing this guy. And there's another instance that happened this weekend that I want to get into, but we'll talk about that later when we talk more about the Mexico Grand Prix. But yeah, they end up losing that position, and then the Twitter war started. I think that's where you left off.
Yeah, and it's I know it's very frustrating to watch these things kind of happen, and Max make very aggressive moves that seemingly go unpunished, but he definitely, obviously was within his right to be able to make the move. The stewards agreed, and it's just one of those things you got to kind of just let it play out the way it's going to play out because it ends up coming back around. It didn't. I don't want to say Max tried the same thing again in Mexico, but it ended up not working out in his favor in Mexico. So which we'll get into later. But some other highlights from COTA for you. For me, it was definitely cool to see Liam come in for his first race in. He had some little bit of squabble with Fernando Alonso.
Oh yeah, and it continued today.
Continued a little. Well, yeah, maybe not as much.
Oh no, he got into it with Checo today. Never mind.
But definitely bumping elbows with the others out on the grid. But
good, make yourself known.
Yeah, excellent first weekend for Liam. He kind of caught Yuki off guard. Yuki kind of got put on the back foot with a bad pit stop timing. I don't know exactly how that kind of worked out as far as like when they decided to have him. I mean, he got passed by, I think it was like Hamilton or somebody in a Mercedes, and then ended up pitting and coming out. I think he got stuck behind Gasly for a little bit. So I don't know if it was just like that bad timing, and he ended up getting stuck and not being able to move forward at all. He was pitted right around them at the same time that I think it was Perez and Magnussen had already pit, and they were able to make moves, but Yuki wasn't, and he saw his new teammate Liam Lawson, who started from the very back of the grid, come out with fresh tires right in front of him, and he goes, "Well, what was that all about? How did this happen, guys?
Yeah.
Like, how did I lose so much time there?" for Liam to be able to make his way in front. So Liam there with his fresh tires and good track position makes his way up into 9th, I think, for his
from
first
19th.
From 19th for his first weekend. So
yeah.
really knocked it out of the park, doing exactly what he needed to be doing in his first weekend. We also saw our boy Franco Colapinto
P10
keeping it consistent, getting points for the Williams
once
on a weekend.
again, beating his teammate too.
Yeah, we saw Alex Albon go out. I think it was in the first turn in Coda, and then
he didn't DNF though.
He didn't.
He brought it back. He finished P14.
Okay, maybe I was thinking of Lewis's DNF.
Lewis goes out on the first
second,
lap.
first or second lap. So yeah,
not a good first lap or the second.
Yeah,
early either way.
Yeah, not a good weekend for Albon.
Even worse weekend for Lewis.
Even worse weekend for Lewis. So I think Mercedes had a just really tough weekend after looking really good in the Friday practice, leading it. I think in the sprint,
George had a really, really great run in the sprint and then just got annihilated. His tires just gave out really, really quickly, and he just got chewed the fuck up. I don't know if it was in the sprint or in the race, though, actually.
In the sprint, he ended up finishing 5th, and then he had his qualifying time was looking pretty good, and then he crashed in qualifying, right? In Q3 or something like that. Crashed out.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't remember.
But yeah, and then ends up bringing it home in 6th for Russell. But yeah, a little bit of a salvage weekend in Coda for the McLarens, coming in 4th and 5th there. Oscar, just I don't know what's going on this past couple weekends. He's
peaks and valleys, dude. He's either running absolutely brilliantly or he's kind of in the back. Like, look at him this weekend. The Mexico Grand Prix, missed out on Q3.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a know-nothing race. Like, he wasn't really visible out there. He didn't make himself known. He might have had like a sneaky better race than I can picture it, but we only saw what we saw from the broadcast, and you didn't really see much from him. He made some overtakes, sure.
It took a while, though.
As expected, you know. But, and it is, you know, the Mexico GP track isn't the easiest to overtake on, but still, just not the greatest little run for Oscar here. And I think it sucks because these are crucial races where Lando's going to need him every step of the way.
Yeah.
And it just seems like Oscar doesn't have it in him to want to do that.
Yeah.
That coupled with the fact that rumors came out this weekend that Oscar and his agent, Mark Webber, have been in talks with Red Bull Racing for who knows how long.
Yeah. Well, it's more that I guess the official story was that Webber was seeking talks. It wasn't like they're actually
they actually had conversations.
But it's more like Weber's like, oh yeah, like, you know, we should sit down and talk about it.
I mean, strong ties there.
You know, that is, they've got history. You know, Red Bull, you know, when they want somebody, they'll go
after him. That would make Oscar Piastri in his short, it would be 3 years next year in his short-lived career, the least allegiance driver I've ever seen in my life.
The most sought after, for sure.
Most sought after and the most selfish.
Yeah, it's pretty. You know, we'll see. I think Oscar seems happy where he's at. He's officially, when asked about this, he said, you know, I'm not going anywhere. I like where I'm at. I'm committed long term.
Good.
So
they can be a great duo. They should stick it out and get close and learn to work together.
Yeah, I think McLaren. You know, they gotta keep it. You know, keep their drivers close to the chest, but.
Yeah, they need to fucking fix something because they're ruining their chances at every step of the way, whether it be the drivers or the team themselves. Like, you know, I love Lando. I want Lando to win, but it was painful to watch him not be able to get past Max for 15 plus laps at Coda, and clearly the faster car. And it was just because he wasn't picking his opportunities right. The second he would close that gap, he would go for it in the wrong place. Not trying to pass on the straightaway, trying to pass on that corner where he knows he's going to get shoved off because Max doesn't know how to drive cleanly or he drives on the line.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing really is that, you know, he's trying to pass Max.
I get that, like 100%. He's perfect.
Yeah,
Max is literally tire perfect.
He knows
every wheel he places in the exact right spot.
Yeah, he knows where the margins are and he knows, you know, how to push it to that. So, you know, and that's what we saw.
The last time that he actually did push Max to the limit, Max took him out.
Yeah.
So
So there's that history too. So it's tough. I mean, when you're for Lando, you got to just, I don't know. You got to just keep applying the pressure and wait for your opportunity, and not try to force it when it's not in the cards, right? I don't know.
I think he needs to force it a little bit more. He needs to be more aggressive. There are just moments, and it looked like it at Coda for me, where when he doesn't have an easy year pass, when it's just genuine wheel-to-wheel racing on almost equal machinery. Like, I do think the McLaren is better and was better in Coda, but the max factor sort of levels things out, right? So when it's a little bit more even, it just seems like Lando doesn't have that fight in him, or it doesn't have that fight, that dog in him to be more aggressive, and he ends up being the one that gets pushed off the line. And like I said, the last time he did hold his line, he ended up with a hole in his car. So
yeah,
I get it, but that would have been a major, major stepping stone in the championship, because it would have been, so Max gained what, 3-4 extra points on him through the sprint.
Mm-hmm.
One extra point in the sprint, 3 extra points in the race, because Max finishes third, Lando fourth. That's a 3-point gap, so that's 4 points right there on the weekend.
Yeah, he ended up.
That would have been pretty vital.
Yeah, he ended up coming away from Coda with a bigger gap.
Yeah, he extended his lead a little bit.
Yeah, it went from like 52 to 57 points or something like that.
Yeah, which it has come down.
Yeah, so
today, but still, that would have been crucial.
Yeah, so our big takeaways from Coda are going to be McLaren maybe lost a bit of momentum going into the break. They're maybe they're going to have a much tougher fight from Ferrari than we had previously imagined. Ferrari, who didn't make any upgrades, one of the only teams to not make any upgrades going into Coda, came out swinging, full momentum, really making the most of their weekend in Coda. Max and Red Bull still, even though they came to Coda with some upgrades, still not quite to the pace of the McLarens and the Ferrari. And then last takeaway, I think we're seeing Haas coming in, double points, or just outside of double points in Coda. Magnussen had his little incident towards the end of the race with a puncture. He had to come in for a second stop, but nonetheless, great performance from Kevin all weekend. Back in after being he was out in Singapore, right, for his penalty.
That was when he served his penalty. Yeah, and then he came
so
back reinvigorated,
just
clean slate, clean driving,
just amazing.
Yeah, he looks great,
like a new Kevin. So that kind of those takeaways from Coda bring us into Mexico, where we see all these.
Well, hold on. Before we do Mexico, should we do props and flops for Coda?
Sure.
Should we knock that out?
Yeah,
or are you trying to translate what you're saying into Mexico?
Yeah, well, I think it was a good moment to segue. If we want to, put Coda to rest with a couple.
Yeah, let's just knock those out. That way we don't forget to do them. Do you have one? I have one.
Go for it.
My major prop has to go to Liam.
Oh, yeah.
Phenomenal drive. First race back, he gets an engine penalty that was, he picked up from Daniel Ricciardo in his time in the car, and just had a great showing. He went wheel to wheel with Fernando Alonso, a legend, didn't back down, moved up 9 places, and puts his car in the points.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give my props to Haas just for coming in and just keeping full steam. I think they had their best finish. I think
their best
1-2 finish.
I think that was until today.
Till today, yeah. So just consistently breaking records for themselves.
They might be the team of the season, honestly. If not them, then Ferrari. But we'll talk about that at the end of the season. And before we do, we'll do flops first, and then I'll say this.
Yeah.
My flop it's got to go to Lewis. Heartbreaker of a weekend, but fuck, man.
Yeah.
At every turn, he just was literally in the pits, just down in the dumps.
Yeah, you really hate to see it.
He had a horrible weekend. It was written all over his face. His media conferences afterwards, he literally had nothing to say. They were like, Lewis, what happened? I don't know.
They after Russell binned his car in qualifying, they only had enough of the upgraded parts for one of the cars, and Lewis was like, George, you can take them. Like, I don't even, you can have them if you want. And he's like, I don't, willing to make that sacrifice. And I think George didn't end up taking it, but I don't think it mattered as much. Yeah.
Yeah, rough weekend. It's really the end of times right there for Lewis at Mercedes. But do you have a flop?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to go to Yuki.
Yeah.
He
looked good all weekend.
He looked good, all like building up. He had a pretty good sprint, and he was up there. He was battling with Checo for like 7th and 8th, and then something happened around that pit stop, and it kind of just slipped away from him. And then he was struggling at the very end, like trying to kind of make up some ground, and he ends up spinning out and
on his own.
And so it's just like, dude, like you gotta.
Let's
just bring it home.
We're gonna have to talk more about Yuki when it comes to Mexico too, obviously. But yeah, bad weekend for Yuki in America when he looked like he was on the up and up. He was having a good start to the weekend. Bins it. We'll talk more about Mexico later. But before we fully transition, we kind of had to glass over this race because we have to get to Mexico. But what a great weekend as a whole the U.S. Grand Prix was.
Yeah.
Like. The sprint quality was phenomenal. The sprint race was quality. The qualies were great. The race was good.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was good. It was a home run for the entire event.
Yeah, totally.
And it had a lot of good implications between Max and Lando. And then, like you mentioned before, the Ferraris, that was like a huge one. It looked, that opened the door for them to overtake Red Bull in the constructors standings, which they ended up doing this afternoon.
Yeah.
So killer weekend in Coda.
Yeah, I mean, great venue, great track, great country.
Probably one of the best. Top 5 country for sure.
Top 5. Cool. So moving on to Mexico.
Bienvenidos.
So back to a normal race weekend. Carlos and the Ferraris, I'd say more specifically Carlos, just on point from the first practice all the way through end of day Sunday.
Yeah, you called it, I think, after FP1 you had texted me because I wasn't able to watch. I actually didn't catch any lead up to the weekend until a replay of qualies yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So I missed everything, and you called it from FP1. You're like, it looks like it's going to be Carlos's weekend.
Dude, I mean, I think the fact that they haven't or didn't come with a big upgrade in Coda is part of the reason why, he was as comfortable as he was. I mean, he was obviously comfortable last weekend, but this weekend even more so, I think he's just on one right now and really feeling comfortable in the car. And so he can really push it to the edge, even if they don't have outright pace that, maybe the McLaren has, but he's just able to really, put the car to work. So, just seeing how he was moving around the track, I was like, dude, he's got the vibe, seeing how he was handling, like how he was interacting with the media and everything. It was just like, this is Carlos's weekend.
Yeah, and especially coming off Coda where it felt like had things just been slightly different,
he could have easily got the win.
He could have easily taken Coda.
Totally.
So you knew he was hungry.
Yeah.
He came out. He did he do a grand slam this weekend? Fastest in all 3 practices, qualies, and then I think he lost out on one of the practices.
Yeah, I don't know about.
I think FP3 it was both McLarens topped him.
And then qualifying, the Ferrari this year, they've knowingly prioritized their car to have better race pace than qualifying pace. So that you've seen that kind of hurt them a little bit in qualifying this year. Carlos, nonetheless, puts together a beautiful lap, gets the pole position. Historically, that can not work to your advantage here in Mexico. So we saw him and Max at the very beginning laps have a little battle. Max ends up taking the lead in the very beginning, we had a little bit of a hiccup in the beginning with Alex Albon getting into it with Yuki Tsunoda. Both of their races ended in the very beginning. Very unfortunate. I was hoping that both of them would get some redemption here after such a disappointing weekend in Coda, but didn't even get through the first turn, and their weekend was over. But
we might as well talk about that while it's happening. But Yuki Tsunoda was running P3, I think, in 2 of the practice sessions, most notably in FP2, which is the most important session. And then he was like top 5, I think. Let me see all the practice results. He was 7th in FP3, and then I think P3 in FP1 and FP2. So having another great weekend. He doesn't have a great qualifying. Probably gets caught out in a little bit of traffic and just misses out.
Yeah, well, so it was their Q2 runs. It was the last runs. Both him and Liam had kind of waited. I don't think they did a run early on in Q2. They kind of both waited, and Yuki, as him and Liam were kind of one of the last cars to go out and do their last Q2 run, and Yuki Tsunoda getting, I think it was maybe the last turn or so, ends up spinning, crashing out, and Liam was behind him. Liam's not able to get his final run
once again on his own.
On his own, so
both
of them,
going right into the stadium, he fucking lost it.
Yeah, so he could have maybe qualified, gotten into Q3. Both of them maybe were able to get up into Q3, but with that Yuki's little spin right there, it takes them out, and they qualify 11th and 12th.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and I was wondering, I was like, they started on opposite tire strategies. Yuki was on the medium, Liam was on the hard, or maybe reversed, but yeah. Didn't really get to see how that was going to play out. So,
and then because of where he finishes, he ends up going 4 wide with a couple different cars. It was Pierre, Alex, him, and I bet you Liam or somebody or Lance or some dunce was out there on the far side. Pierre comes over, shoves Alex over. Alex has to brake, locks up. Yuki tries to go around, or just kind of extends himself, and they touch tires, and not only is Alex out having another bad weekend, but there goes Yuki after having a good start to a weekend.
Yeah.
Bada bing, bada boom. And he crashes in the exact same place he crashed 2 years ago in Mexico City. And you got to think that it's not looking good for old Ukester.
Yeah. And I had him again. I had him for fantasy because I lost a lot of points with him in Coda, and I was like, you know what? He's probably going to bounce back, have a good race. He's going to be fired up. And it didn't end up working out. So.
I think I texted you. I don't know if you saw it. I completely quit on fantasy.
Yeah, you've given up.
There was 3 races where I forgot to even put a team together and submit it.
No, you're just out of completely.
And so I'm just out of it. And I was like, I need phone storage. And my phone is just full of apps. So I was like, fuck Grid Rival. I'm done.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry to the group, but
yeah,
I'm out.
It's better that way.
I'm pulling a punk move this year.
Yeah. So what should we talk about next?
What was it? It was Max on the first lap. Lando stays in tight. I don't know.
Oh yeah, and then so they ended up having a safety car. It took about 4
or 5 laps, I think.
Yeah, I feel like it was lap 7 or 8. So when they restarted.
Yeah, dude, let's talk about that restart that Max had. Where he decided to start his launch was in the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's turn 14 or 15, and it's around one of the slowest corners I think in F1, and that's where he got it, and it was brilliant. It created so much separation between him and everybody else because everybody had to take this long time, and he was just gone because it's a lead up to that giant, the longest straightaway in Formula One.
Mm-hmm.
So around that last corner, and then around just straight down that straightaway, and between him and who was it? Carlos in second, Lando in third. There was a solid 2 seconds between each one of them.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't but a few laps before Carlos got him, though. So it wasn't getting him too far. And then so Carlos gets Max. Max and Lando have another tussle after, I don't know how many laps it had been. I think we're maybe around 15 to 20 within there.
Yeah.
And
Carlos got around him, and then Max. Yeah, about 15, 20.
Yeah, so Lando this time trying to make a pass on the outside of Max, gets pushed off, and we see Lando kind of just go through the grass, and then Lando, I don't know exactly how it went down, but Max ends up getting a penalty, 5-second penalty for forcing Lando off, and then got an additional 5-second penalty for
not giving
the place back. So I feel like he ended up getting a 20 seconds.
No, he got a 10-second penalty for forcing somebody off the track, and then a 10-second penalty.
Yeah, so total of 20 seconds worth of penalties for his clash this weekend with Lando. So I got to go back and look. It was probably as egregious as we probably think it is, but it could have been. I don't think it was stewards getting back at him or trying to make up for something that happened last week, and it was really just
maybe Max. This is the stewards telling McLaren, "How about you just you rescind your appeal and we'll just give you guys this one."
See, I think it was purely Max just. It went over the line this time.
It was much more obvious than Coda, which I didn't even say earlier when we were talking about the Max and Lando incident at Coda. That was Max's corner, I think.
I mean, the way he
in the
did
COTA race, not in the Mexico one, but I think that was Max's corner.
I mean, technically it was because he was ahead at the apex.
Yes.
But if you look at it, like,
But he did shove him off track.
Yeah, like Lando was ahead at the entry of the corner because, he had already made the pass technically, but that's where it starts to get really complicated. Is like who's ahead, or like who technically is the overtaking car in that situation.
To me, the one that was more egregious was the lap 1 in COTA, but we don't need to go back to that. We've already talked about it. Anyway.
But yeah, so here Max probably just in a bit of desperation trying to maintain his track position, because there was, the pack was pretty tight at this point. And after Max and Lando both end up losing a bit of time in their struggle going off track, battling with each other, Charles Leclerc makes his way through up into second. So we got a Ferrari 1-2, 2 weekends in a row, looking really strong for them.
With no significant upgrades. It's crazy.
Just taking full advantage of progress that they've made earlier on in the season and refining that, and both drivers taking the time to get comfortable with it. I think that's a big, they prioritize, their tire life in the race and their race pace and all that stuff, like going into the season. And I think just having that as their like development strategy is definitely like been paying off for them. So this is a good example of it this weekend. Lando able to track down Charles towards the end of the race, so he ends up splitting the Ferraris.
Well, it wasn't just that he tracked him down. He was going to catch him either way because he was in his DRS. There was enough time, and he had better pace. But Charles actually goes off track. Remember that? He ran wide.
Yeah, well, there were, it was a couple laps that Lando was just like right behind him within a second.
It was gonna happen.
Pressure was on, yeah.
But I think that's why he made the mistake was he was trying to defend a little bit.
Yeah.
And then just the dust in the track and whatever circumstances with his tires, but he goes wide. And that was a good thing for Lando, or it ended up being amount to nothing, but he was able to save a little bit of tire life to create some distance. Had he had X more laps, who knows if he would have caught. But probably not. But he ends up taking P2.
Yeah.
Long story short.
So, and then we got Hamilton ends up getting back by Russell. 4th and 5th for Mercedes. I think this is probably a good weekend for them. Like, not on the podium. Like, we've seen them win races this year.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of podium finishes. Maybe not a lot of podium finishes, but we've seen some handful of them from the, either of the drivers. But here, for them to finish 4th and 5th, I think after the little run they've had in this middle part of the season, I think this is a good spot for them to build from.
They had a nice little scrap, too. They were going back and forth for a while until Lewis was finally able to pull it off.
Yeah, things would have been different if Max hadn't got that penalty. They might be able to, you might have seen Hamilton getting up to the back of Max or something.
Speaking of George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, and Max's penalty.
Oh, yeah, when it gets to
this. The team, this pissed both of us off. So the team announces over radio, hey, George, Max has a 20-second penalty. Just heads up. And George Russell's first response was, where's Lewis?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you always fucking concerned with where your teammate is at? He's so goddamn obsessed. He's not worried about maximizing points versus Verstappen. He's worried about how he's going to look in the outcome versus Lewis. Or maybe we're jumping the gun and our first instinct was to just jump down George's throat. Maybe he was curious about Lewis's position within that 20 seconds. And if they can make it, if they can both jump ahead of him. But it's always, dude, it's always with George. The first fucking comments on radio, anything.
Yeah, it's
always Lewis.
It seems like that's the person who he seems to be most cared about beating on any given weekend, right?
Which, yes, like your biggest rival is your teammate. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
But right now you've got bigger things. Like you should be concerned with trying to catch the Ferraris.
Yeah, it's like you have bigger fish to fry than beating your teammate who's leaving the team.
It's like he's clearly on the outs physically and emotionally. Like,
yeah, it's just Lewis has obviously been dealing with his own problems this year. You don't really need to be concerning yourself with where you fit into all that, George.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think he just needs to keep his head down, focus on getting that car in a better situation.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. Kevin Magnussen coming in 7th behind Max, who finished in 6th. Probably best case scenario for Max given his 20-second penalties.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar ends up finishing there in 8th. Hulk 9th. We've got Haas double points again. This is huge.
Phenomenal.
Let's see where they're sitting now.
That should keep them in 6th. Am I wrong?
I know they made a big jump last week.
6th.
Yeah, so I think, if they they're probably going to stay right where there's too much of a gap for them to get to Aston Martin probably.
Yeah.
Oh, there would have to be a lot that happens, but
They would have to finish very high in each race, and I just don't think there's enough points on
Yeah.
the table for them.
Yeah, they'd have to get double points. Basically, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's 40 points to make up. That's a lot. So
It's just not in their window.
yeah, and then they've got 10. So right now they've just got to stay ahead of the RBs. 10 points on the RBs, which I think is possible. If they can do that, I think that would be a great accomplishment for them.
Be huge.
Yeah. Let's see what else.
I mean, we didn't really talk enough about Checo.
Oh yes,
For the Mexico Grand Prix?
Yes, I mean he's the debutante of the ball.
Yeah.
When we come here, but
It's a celebration of Sergio Perez.
yeah,
And they had the audacity following this race to call Carlos Sainz the king of Mexico. Fucking Christ. Because, I mean, Checo was nowhere to be found. He qualifies P19. He goes out in Q1.
yeah,
Q1 in his home race, when last year's race, he fucking DNFs on the first lap and almost takes Charles with him.
yeah. I mean, I need to go back and maybe watch again what happened exactly, but it just I don't know what happened.
He was in there. He was in there in the last few seconds of the hot laps of Q1 and didn't make it.
That's why I don't understand. It's like, what is it? Just traffic that caught him out? He just wasn't able to get the lap together through both runs.
He was one of the last guys to be out there. It was
Yeah.
him and Oscar, and they both went out. So maybe there was a traffic issue because that's two drivers that you
Yeah.
wouldn't expect to go out. But that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
And then, he moved up, 5 spots in the beginning?
Yeah, in the first lap, he moved up 5 places.
And then had something happen where he ended up falling back.
Him and Liam, he was trying to make it by Liam Lawson.
Yeah, they touched.
Yeah, they had a little contact.
So that's what we were talking about
Checo
earlier.
got a hole in his side pod.
Yeah, so last weekend at Coda, Liam Lawson gets into it with Fernando. This week, and Fernando's calling him a fucking idiot. And then this weekend in Mexico, Sergio Perez is like, that fucking idiot.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see how that
That
checks
fucking
out.
idiot's about to take your job. So,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Liam wasn't able to. He was close to the points. He wasn't able to bring it fully into the points this weekend. Had this little incident, but oh yeah, he ended up pitting at the very end, going for a fastest lap. We had another fastest lap debacle this weekend.
Is that like the bow that we put on this? This is very controversial, I think. So first things first, Liam Lawson goes out for fastest lap, which is already come into controversy from Coda when they put Daniel Ricciardo out in that same car to go steal the fastest lap point, which he does.
Because Lando had it at this point.
Lando had it. That would have been an extra point for Lando and McLaren. The RB goes out and steals it from him. Everybody knows the ties with RB, Red Bull, Helmut Marko. That doesn't need to be explained. But it was something that Zach Brown, Lando Norris, and McLaren as a whole said that if under any different circumstances other than Daniel Ricciardo's last race and one last hurrah, it'd be something that they would look into for a conflict of interest or whatever. There it is right there. They did it. He stole the lap, and then Leclerc goes out and steals it back from him, right?
Yeah.
Was that how it worked out?
Very last lap, Leclerc went out and took it. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get any more obvious than that. If I'm Zach Brown, you have to do what you can do in that scenario. I don't know what they can do, because I don't even know if the phrase conflict of interest is of any weight with this situation.
Yeah, I
but
don't know. I mean, I will say this: after the last time it happened with Ricardo on his way out, they announced that they're taking away
fastest lap point anyway
for next year, right?
Yeah.
So it's like obviously there's like some type of issue that is known. You know,
Yes.
they know that it's like not, you know.
It should be the pole position award. It should be 1 point for whoever gets on pole.
There, yeah.
I mean, because I like the idea of the fastest lap point of some extra, you know, like a merit award, right?
Yeah, but not when it gets used like this. I mean, if they didn't have
Two teams.
it wouldn't be an issue. That's the thing
Correct.
that's so stupid. But they, you know, just the situation that Formula One is in, like they can't take that second team away from Red Bull.
Yeah, it's too late.
So I don't know. Anything else you want to mention from Mexico? If you feel like,
Oh, man.
I mean,
I'm trying to think, like, overall, very happy with this race. Overall, about as boring as a Mexico Grand Prix usually is. Some exciting shit, you know.
yeah, I mean,
Some fun overtakes, like the Lando and the Chuck was pretty fun. The opening of the race between the 3 or the 4 of them up top was good. But a pretty typical Mexico Grand Prix, but I am very happy to say that the broadcast had mentioned that this is one of their favorite places to watch a race.
mhm.
They made that very, very known, and that's of the 2 races that I've been to, it's my favorite. I like it better than going to Coda.
Mhm.
Not for the racing, but for the atmosphere and the environment.
Yeah. Oh, I've
It's
heard
a great.
Yeah, a lot like a festival. You know,
It's a
'cause
great
there's so
event,
much
yeah.
other stuff going on there that's
Yeah.
it's really fun to take part in.
So, and I'm bringing it up because there was talks of Mexico maybe not being on the calendar once
Mhm.
Checo's gone, because they might be losing.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like the fans will still come out. You know what I
I
mean?
would hope so.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, maybe they move Pato Award into a seat. Who knows?
yeah.
Ooh, Pato Award to Red Bull. That's sexy.
Did you watch his practice session? Oh, you didn't.
I didn't
see
get to
it,
see
yeah.
any.
You know,
I know he finished like he was like 16th in the charts.
yeah. Pato. I mean, he's a great driver, but it's Formula One's so different from IndyCar. You know, he would really need to. He still looks a little rough around the edges. You know,
Mhm.
He would really need to dedicate and spend time
He would probably need to get out of IndyCar and come spend a year with a team,
just doing sim work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's just a little a ways away.
that's such a gamble because he's an established IndyCar driver.
Yeah,
who's
he's winning titles and
Yeah.
killing it over. It's like,
gotten second place at the Indy 500 2 years in a row.
yeah,
So, like, do you sacrifice your racing career in IndyCar for a shot at a small window of an opportunity to be an F1 driver?
yeah.
Or,
I don't know. You have to really, really want it and want the challenge. You know. So,
yeah.
but I don't know. It was cool to see him. You know, I'm glad he's getting his time in there. You gonna do some props and flops from Mexico?
Yeah. I feel like you deserve the first prop because it's pretty obvious to me, and you called it. So
Yeah,
It's there for you if you
I'll
want it.
take a little side step. I'm gonna let you take it.
okay.
I'm gonna give my props to Gasly, Pierre Gasly, getting a point for Alpine. It's their first point since Zandvoort.
Holy shit! I didn't even realize that.
He had an amazing drive in Coda, except for his team had a really bad pit stop. I think he ended up having like an 8 or 10 second pit stop, something like that. Ended up taking him out of the points. I think from there he kind of just spiraled backwards. So for him here to get in good, he got the car in a Q3 again. I think he qualified 8th, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Brings it home, still in 10th. You know, a little bit behind the Haas's, but I think this is you know, he's doing exactly what he needs to do for the team, especially when his teammate was sitting back there, you know, towards the back, 2 races in a row.
Yeah.
Good for Pierre.
Totes. Yeah, I haven't even I haven't even noticed that they haven't pointed in half the fucking season so
Mhm.
far. Anyway, obvious prop goes to Carlos Sainz. Phenomenal weekend.
His third race win of his career.
Second of the season, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Damn. He's having quite a year for a guy who lost his seat this season.
Yeah, you know, maybe kind of lit a fire under his butt a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, last year he was doing really good too. It's you know, at the
He
beginning of the
seems-
season we were talking about, you know, why is Carlos, you know,
Losing
why is he
his seat.
losing his seat? You know,
I mean, that whole conversation of like, oh, they fired the wrong guy. Like, it's fun to bring up and everything, but we all knew that if the choice was going to come, it was going to go to Charles. He is Ferrari's favorite son.
Yeah.
But it does seem like Carlos fits that car so much better. He drives it so much more consistently, and when he drives it well, he drives it better than Chuck drives it.
Yeah.
You know? And Chuck had a good weekend too. So that one is obvious. But getting into flops, there's a lot more flops to give out than there are props, I think. I will give an honorable.
that, yeah.
I'll give it an honorable mention prop to Haas. We mentioned them, double points, probably the best fit. I think it was the best finish they've had all year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So an honorable mention. But my biggest flop is going to go to Yuki Tsunoda. I think it's easy to go with Checo, but he didn't even look as good as Yuki did throughout the entire weekend when Yuki had this race in his grasp and let it go. Even though it wasn't really his fault completely, he did fuck up his own qualifying session. Had he not fucked that up, he wouldn't have been in a 4-car pileup. He would have been closer to the front. He probably still would have found a way to fuck himself up, so it doesn't really matter. But I do want to mention Yuki and give him the flop because I also want to give an honorable mention flop to Alexander Albon, who was part of that wreck, if not the majority of that wreck, and say, we brought this up. What about a world where Alex Albon leaves Williams next year?
And Franco takes the spot.
Franco Colapinto gets that spot because there's already been rumors, and it was your wife who actually sent me this text. I read it yesterday, that there's a chance that Alex Albon has a 3-year contract with Red Bull starting 2025 anyways.
Oh, wow.
So imagine a world where Franco Colapinto and Carlos Sainz are at Williams. That kind of looks better on paper now, the way that Franco's driving compared to Alex, making Williams a contender for the midfield next season.
I mean, if Franco keeps up on this pace, it's looking like that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to hear that, but
yeah,
maybe Alex will like returning back to Red Bull, find some type of peace there. But
I don't even know if they put him if he goes back to the Red Bull family, if that rumor's true that it's already
just
a done
crazy
deal.
How quickly things have changed.
Dude, shit can fly in a different direction so quickly. And maybe we shouldn't be jumping the gun with any of it because we know it can just snap back right back into place. But what if if he has signed this deal, which it came from a pretty reputable source. It was that Red Bull Racing Daily page.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And let's say he signs with Red Bull and he just ends up back in a V-carb and Liam Lawson's in the seat. Because, would you be willing to give Alexander Albon a Red Bull seat right now?
I don't know about that.
Or Liam clearly looks better than he does.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of factors.
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Crazy. All right, you prop it and flop it.
All right, so I gave my props to Gasly already, but I'm going to give my flop to you said Yuki, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to go Checo. I don't know. I'll give Checo. He's hurting enough as it is right now. I'm gonna go flop to Alfa Romeo, or not Alfa Romeo. Wow, that's really
wow. We know who you're talking about. But
yeah, Kick
Sauber.
Kick Sauber. Currently, their drivers are sitting 23rd and 24th in a 20-driver.
Unthinkable.
So
GP2 car.
Bottas, I was out there, hanging around inside the points, but they kept him out there for a while without a pit stop, just hoping for the safety car to try and get something to happen. But
you know what? We might need to actually. Okay, you can flop them, but maybe we'd have to give an honorable mention of a prop to Valtteri Bottas. He made it into Q2.
That's true.
He ousted Sergio Perez and Oscar Piastri.
He's never. I don't know if he's never qualified outside of the top 10
in Mexico.
There. Yeah, or if it's he never finished the race outside the top 10. Something like that.
I don't know. He holds the record for the fastest or the highest mile per hour in Formula One history.
Yeah.
In a Mercedes at the Mexico GP, it was 236 or something.
Oh wow, that's crazy! I didn't realize it was at Mexico.
The highest speed, yeah, it was on that straightaway.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, okie dokie. That it?
Yeah. So we're heading into Interlagos.
Best race of the year coming up next weekend, baby.
Our third race of the triple header. Do you want to make any predictions?
I was going to ask you that. I'm going to predict that. I'm going to say Ferrari has another great weekend. Which by the way, we didn't mention, they have officially slid into second place in the Constructors' Championship. Yeah. Huge. Insane.
All right, so do we think both Ferraris on the podium in Brazil?
No.
No?
I think it might be a 3-team podium or a 2 McLaren podium. I think McLaren's going to have a great weekend here.
Okay.
And the gap to Max Verstappen is going to shrink. It now sits at 47. I'm expecting it to be at least a 40-point gap.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it could be a Ferrari podium, double podium again, and then a McLaren. I think it's either going to be. I feel like Lando's going to backslide again. I feel like.
Think so?
I think he's going to have a backslide.
I mean, obviously anything's possible. I think he's going to have a good race. Maybe it's just me wanting him to have a good race.
Yeah, I mean
it does feel like he's going to
certainly needs. He gained some points this weekend, but I think that he's going to end up losing those points back.
The Ferraris are the worst thing to happen to Lando's season.
That's true.
They've taken probably 20 points from him in the last.
I don't know. I mean, Lando's probably the worst thing.
Lando and McLaren might be the worst thing to happen to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm gonna say 40 points between Lando and Max. I think it's going to be either a McLaren 1-2 with a Ferrari on top, or a McLaren sandwich with Carlos Sainz in the middle.
Okay.
I don't think it's gonna be Chuck. I think it's gonna be Carlos.
All right. Well, let's see that happen.
All right. We'll see you guys in Brazil. Peace.
See you then. Bye-bye.